Welcome to Discover You Radio's discussion. Stay tuned for Dakota Freeman and Lauren Miller as they get into an intense debate regarding the subject matter as they give two separate opinions.
It's 10 after 6, you're clocked out, the registers are shut down, and there's that customer peeking through the window like a lost raccoon. Get Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle. He addresses this. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle.
Welcome to episode number 46 of Discover You Radio's discussion segment called The Debate, where we are going to share our disagreements on chapter number 3 of Brandon Eagle's book called Your Guide to Customer Service, the Mirror Edition, which can be found on Amazon in paperback, or you can download it to your Kindle. Let's get started. So imagine risking your entire career and honestly thousands of dollars of your company's money just because you tried to be nice for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
Right? I mean, anyone listening to this who has actually worked a service desk knows the exact pit in their stomach when a customer, casually points out to the parking lot and says, "Hey, can you just come outside and listen to this noise real quick?"
Because it is never, ever real quick.
Never. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We are examining the rewording ritual. Brandon Eagle's text really zeroes in on these customers who repeatedly rephrase their requests, basically trying to get a free informal diagnosis to bypass the proper documented repair order procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So the central question for our debate today is about liability and professional boundaries. Basically, do service advisors bear an unfair professional risk during these encounters? And should managers rigidly prioritize policy over appeasing these persistent customers?
Right. And I know exactly where you stand on this.
Oh, absolutely. My position is that advisors face an asymmetrical, fundamentally unfair liability booby trap. The pressure placed on them is just immense, and management must absolutely prioritize policy over appeasement, because any deviation, even a small one, invites catastrophic liability.
And, well, I take the opposing view on this. While I certainly acknowledge that the risk is real, I argue that it represents a standard professional boundary, not some, unfair trap. Furthermore, rigidly treating every persistent customer as a malicious manipulator, which, let's be honest, the text sometimes leans toward.
It has a strong perspective, yes.
It does, but that ignores the nuanced psychological reality of service interactions. Customers who reword their requests are overwhelmingly driven by profound financial anxiety or just a lack of understanding about automotive repair. It's not a calculated desire to sabotage the advisor's career.
Well,
protecting the business is essential. I agree with that. But doing so with a fortress mentality, that alienates the very people you are in business to serve.
Okay, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on why that fortress mentality is, frankly, entirely necessary. You really have to look at the daily reality of the service drive.
Okay.
In many ways, the drive functions like a courtroom, and the advisor is constantly on trial. If you step back and look at the mechanism of what is actually happening when a customer asks for a quick listen, it's an ambush.
An ambush? That's a strong word.
It is, because the customer is asking the advisor to step outside, give an off-the-cuff verbal diagnosis, and basically take all the risk with absolutely none of the documentation. Let me offer an analogy to clarify how absurd this is.
Go ahead.
It's like walking into a high-end restaurant, grabbing the host at the podium.
The person doing the seating.
Right? The person not cooking. And you demand they guess the secret ingredient in the chef's signature sauce. And then you sue the restaurant when the host guesses wrong and you have an allergic reaction.
Okay, wow.
You're bypassing the process, asking the wrong person, and shifting all the liability onto the business. If the advisor steps outside, listens to a rattling sound, and casually says, "Oh, it's probably just a loose heat shield," and it later turns out to be a failing wheel bearing that causes an accident,
the advisor is on the hook.
Fully liable. The verbal gas magically transforms into a legally binding statement of what the dealership said. That is why it's an inherently unfair position to put them in.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Your restaurant analogy actually highlights my point perfectly
How so?
because the liability only exists if the host voluntarily decides to play chef. If the host simply says, "I'm sorry, I don't make the food, you'll have to order the dish," there is no liability.
But the same applies to the service drive. The risk isn't an unfair ambush if the advisor simply refuses to play Guess That Noise. Eagle's text beautifully outlines the psychology behind this with what he calls the customer logic loop.
Right, the shrinking request.
Exactly. The customer is employing this intuitive, kind of primitive negotiation tactic. They deeply believe that if they shrink the request, asking for just a second or just an opinion, they magically shrink the financial cost of the diagnosis.
Yes, they want it for free, but that loop is born of sheer panic about a potentially ruined engine, not malice. An advisor who just adheres to their role, refusing to give an undocumented diagnosis, is just practicing standard professional boundary setting. They aren't navigating an unfair legal minefield unless they voluntarily step on a mine. The boundary is clear. Enforcing it is the job.
Enforcing it is the job, sure, but just holding the boundary is not nearly as simple as you make it sound.
Why not? They just have to say no.
Because the text details exactly how this rewording ritual plays out, and it is explicitly designed to wear the advisor down. Let's do a quick roleplay to show how this actually unfolds in the drive.
Oh, all right, let's do it.
Okay, I'll be the stressed advisor giving the legally mandated, highly structured response Eagle outlines. You be the customer.
Sounds good. I'm walking up to the desk. Hey, I've got this weird rattling sound. Can you just come out and tell me what it is real quick?
I understand, sir. But for our own protection, if we're going to help you find a noise, we have to write a repair order so your technician can listen to the noise with you.
I know you need to do all that, but I have this noise I'd really just like you to listen to. Can you just step out for a second? It's just a simple noise.
Again, we have to write a repair order so the technician can listen.
Yeah, but if you just listen, you might know what it is. And scene.
And scene. Exactly. To you, the customer, it feels like you're just seeking clarity. But to the advisor, that is a slow-motion cross-examination. And if the advisor cracks, if they give in just to end the relentless repetition, the operational failure is massive.
Because they aren't the technician.
Right. Let's look at the actual mechanism of that failure. The advisor goes out, listens, comes back, and writes a repair order based on their own, frankly, amateur guess. Now the technician, the highly paid trained diagnostician, gets a ticket with half-baked secondhand information.
True, that's not ideal.
The tech goes hunting for a loose heat shield because the advisor was anchored to that guess and wastes an hour of expensive bay time missing the actual failing component. The entire shop's efficiency derails just because the advisor was worn down by a coercive tactic.
Look, protecting the tech is fine in theory, but look at the cost of that rigid protection. When you enforce these boundaries like an unyielding brick wall, you turn a simple customer interaction into a hostile standoff.
It doesn't have to be hostile.
But it often becomes that way. Yes, Eagle establishes clear rules about the division of labor. The advisor documents the technician diagnosis. And I completely agree that this division protects the integrity of the diagnostic process. A technician absolutely needs to experience the symptom directly.
Glad we agree on that.
But my contention is with the assumption that the customer is deliberately executing a coercive tactic. Eagle's rules assert that repetition doesn't rewrite reality, and that asking the same question 5 different ways is just hunting for someone to break policy.
Which is true.
True, but the customer doesn't realize the wall isn't there to block them. It's there to protect the repair process. If we treat their persistence as a malicious interrogation, the advisor approaches the interaction defensively. That psychological wear and tear you mentioned earlier, it is massively amplified by the advisor believing they're under attack, rather than just dealing with a stressed human being who doesn't understand shop logistics.
Okay, but an advisor cannot hold that boundary, regardless of whether they view the customer as malicious or just anxious, if their manager undercuts them the second a customer complains.
Ah, the management piece.
Right, this brings us to the operational core of Eagle's framework, specifically the rule that management must back the policy, not the persistence. Let's say the advisor stands firm. The customer gets frustrated and demands to speak to the service manager. The customer says, "Your advisor wouldn't even walk outside for 10 seconds to listen to my car."
which happens every day.
Every single day. And if the manager caves, if they step in and say, okay, let's just go take a quick look to calm them down, they have completely destroyed the system.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered how incredibly blunt, almost hostile, the author's prescribed management solutions are?
Hostile? I'd call it firm.
Well, let's look at the text. Eagle explicitly addresses the underlying issue of financial anxiety, but his solution lacks any nuance. He writes that if the customer keeps pushing because they don't have the diagnostic fee, they should, and I quote, park your car in your garage until you can come up with it.
Yeah, it's tough love.
It's alienating, such a rigid, unyielding enforcement of policy, prioritizing a hardline stance over any form of empathetic de-escalation. It paints all persistence as an existential threat to the business. A manager stepping in to de-escalate isn't necessarily destroying the system. Sometimes it is just recognizing that a strictly transactional application of policy is terrible customer service.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, mostly because you are conflating empathy with liability assumption. Eagle's tone is blunt because the consequences are severe. Empathy for a customer's wallet does not alter the laws of physics, mechanics, or jurisprudence.
But it alters the customer relationship.
Sure, but if a customer cannot afford a diagnostic fee, having a manager guess at a noise for free does not solve their financial problem. It merely transfers the financial liability to the dealership when the guess is invariably wrong. A small exception for a simple noise still carries full-size consequences.
I'm not saying the manager should give a free diagnosis, though.
But that's what stepping out to listen is. If management gives a secret shortcut just to quiet a complaining customer, they train that customer and honestly every other customer watching in the waiting room that policies are fake.
Well,
They establish a precedent that professional diagnosis is just a free guessing game for whoever argues the longest. That is exactly why Eagle's rule about free guesses getting expensive is so vital. Free now means costly later in the form of comebacks, bad parts ordered, and broken trust. Consistency is not stubbornness, it is protection.
Again, I am not suggesting the manager should give a free diagnosis, but a manager can de-escalate without acting like a bouncer at a nightclub.
A bouncer?
Yeah. If management rigidly views every request for a quick listen as a liability booby trap, the service department becomes an adversarial environment. The text advises that we should view no as a boundary, not a personal attack. I completely agree with that principle.
Exactly.
no, we can't just listen without a repair order, is an active professional responsibility. But the shop has to communicate that responsibility without the underlying subtext that the customer is trying to pull a fast one. Healthy service departments run on clear boundaries, yes, but they also run on trust. When you tell a struggling customer to just park it in your garage, you aren't protecting the business. You are ensuring that customer never returns when they actually do have the money.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The trust you are talking about can only be built on a foundation of reality.
Okay.
And the reality is, as Eagle puts it in his final rule, repetition does not rewrite reality. The customer's entire strategy, conscious or not, is based on the flawed premise that if they keep talking, the truth of the mechanical failure will somehow change or the cost will magically disappear.
Right, the logic loop?
It won't. The manager and the advisor must be the ultimate guarantors of that truth. Let's actually move to the lightning round and hit all 10 of these rewarder rules quickly, because they act like the jury instructions in this whole legal framework we've built.
Oh, I like that. The jury instructions. Let's do it.
Okay, rules 1 and 2, one real answer and stop shopping. Basically, repetition doesn't unlock a secret menu.
Fully agree there. Asking 5 times doesn't change the answer.
Rules 3 and 4. Advisors aren't drive-by diagnosticians, and the division of roles. I think this perfectly proves the liability argument.
I agree with the rules, but I stress that this protects the technician's time just as much as it protects the advisor from liability.
Fair enough. Rules 5 and 6. Free guesses get expensive, and policy is protection. As I noted, free now means costly later with comebacks and complaints.
Right. And rules 7 and 8, take no as a boundary and trust the process. I think this is where healthy departments excel. They run on those boundaries, not on who can argue the longest.
Exactly. And finally, rules 9 and 10. Back policy and repetition doesn't rewrite reality, which is a perfect summary of our clash on management's role. Management has to hold the line.
If you soften the boundary too much in the name of de-escalation, you do risk giving false reassurance. I'll give you that.
Yes, telling a customer it doesn't sound too bad just to get them out the door feeling good is infinitely worse than telling them a hard truth about diagnostic fees. Policy protects the business from undocumented liability, it protects the tech from secondhand info, and crucially, it protects the customer from bad guesses.
I still come at it from a slightly different angle. I believe you can maintain the absolute integrity of that diagnostic process without the absolute severity of the enforcement. We both agree that the technician is the only appropriate person to diagnose a vehicle.
100%.
We both agree that an undocumented quick listen in the drive circumvents the necessary expertise for proper repair, but the mechanism of delivering that truth matters. The rewording ritual is a symptom of an information asymmetry.
Meaning they just don't know what we know.
Exactly. The customer knows they're out of their depth, they know it might be really expensive, and they are grasping for any life raft of free information they can find. Recognizing that dynamic allows an advisor to hold the line with professional compassion, rather than viewing the encounter as some kind of courtroom cross-examination.
Well, as we draw this discussion to a close, it is pretty clear we have reached a strong point of convergence on the core mechanics of the text. The division of roles in a service department is sacred. Bypassing the repair order process creates a cascade of operational failures from the service desk all the way to the technician's bay.
We do completely agree on the operational necessity of the repair order. Where we maintain our continued disagreement is in the framing of the human interaction itself.
Right.
You view Eagle's strict, almost militaristic framing as necessary protection against an unfair liability trap. I view it as an overly defensive posture. Boundaries are essential to protect the repair process, but if we assume every persistent reworker is laying a trap, we lose the fundamental service aspect of customer service.
And I maintain that regardless of the customer's intent, whether it is born of financial desperation, ignorance of the process, or an actual manipulative strategy, the outcome for the advisor and the business is exactly the same: an unacceptable assumption of legal and financial liability.
A fair point.
By examining this rewording ritual from both a strict liability standpoint and a human behavior standpoint, we really gain a much deeper understanding of the intense, high-stakes dynamics at play in a service department. The interaction is never just about a random noise. It is about establishing professional authority, maintaining process integrity, and navigating the complex psychology of negotiation in real time.
There is certainly much more to explore in this material. Understanding how these boundaries shape professional environments is critical for anyone managing complex customer interactions. I'm looking forward to our next segment when we tackle Chapter 4, titled The Couple Scam. That's going to be an intense argument. I can already feel it in my core.
Your guide to customer service addresses the couple scam. That's where the wife drops off in the morning, the husband picks up at night and complains about the bill. Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle. You can get it on Amazon and Kindle.
Thank you for listening to Discover You Radio's discussions. We'd like to invite you to research was spotlighted on this episode. And if they have a website, join their mailing list. Thank you for your support.